getting hotter and hotter. Gotta get up earlier and earlier. Every location I go, every morning. Good morning, it's about 5:50 a.m. on June 1st, and I'm gonna go ahead and let the cat out of the bag. I talked in previous episodes about the grazed and ungrazed areas after someone asked me if I had any evidence of those. So today I'm going to show you the spots that I've been able to watch where goat grazing hasn't taken place and goat grazing has taken place. And remember, I've been filming this each month, checking how it changes each month over the last couple of years. But the first spot we're going to go look inside of is this urban forest area. Sorry, it's hard for me not to talk about the disrespectful, irresponsible people that live in urban sprawl. It's about 5:55. The neglected dogs are already outside unattended, barking. Noisy ass mufflers driving all over the neighborhoods. All right, so I mentioned that these were the result of an urban forestry project. There's the old irrigation pipe that they didn't remove. And you see that there are indeed weeds down here. You know, I never claimed that it was an overnight miracle. What I want you to pay attention to is the height and the density. If you watched any of the videos from the last couple of days at the other location that I've been calling location 1, you know, between the ripgut brome and the slender oats and the Italian thistle, it's all about this height. This isn't even close to that. You also see that these trees all have the leaves on their lower branches because they weren't stripped bare by the goats. Got a couple of random things happening here and there. There's some slender oats. Notice how these have fallen over on their own. I mean, no one's come through here and done this. And I keep crossing my fingers that the Park Service doesn't suddenly one day have a meeting and be like, oh, we haven't gone out and managed this area. Because as soon as they do, this is going to be a nightmare. They're going to ruin all of this progress. We got like 700 or so valley oak trees. For those of you who haven't watched the episodes where I make fun of this project, these things are potentially supposed to reach 100 feet tall and have 60-foot canopies, and these idiots planted them like this, which means these trees are already competing with each other. They're already stunted in growth, and at some point the city's gonna just come through and start chopping the branches off. Again, it's job security. Do something wrong, and then you can spend the next few years managing the problem you created. See, look at the vetch over here. You may notice I mentioned in the video 2 days ago that there's currently some vetch in some areas that is green right now, and you have this vetch that's already this dry. But the really scary thing about the vetch is how it climbs up into the lower branches. If in fact you were going to have a fire, this is quite the delivery system to the lower branches. Now, if the goats had come through here, these would be stripped bare. You wouldn't have any green leaves. You're not going to believe me, but amazingly enough, the weed situation would be even worse because they grow back more vigorously after the goats. So you would still have this, you just wouldn't have the green. I kind of skip over identifying all of these because I do it in so many videos. It's all invasive annuals, almost entirely European or Mediterranean. So let's identify some other things as we're going here. This is prickly lettuce, which is not native. Keep that in mind. Notice how it's growing now, a little bit later stage than the grasses did. We do have a native tall willow herb trying to compete inside of there. And towards the end, we have some poppies. Look at that. I can actually see ground, which just doesn't happen in the areas where they graze with the goats. The density of the invasive weeds is too much. Someone might be arguing, well, the weeds aren't growing as tall over here because of the trees. They're blocking the sun. If you recall, the other location has trees also, actually bigger trees, taller trees. So if anything, there would be more sun blockage over there. I talk about this tree line a lot in my videos because this area, like I said, doesn't get grazed. And I'll come here right after leaving in an area that did get grazed. And from about here down, it's skeletonized. Big difference is if I walk through here and like I see a jackrabbit or something that I spook, it can immediately hide. The other place, it has nowhere to run. I can see it. I can see it fleeing. Getting a little bit more variety, some more green things, more prickly lettuce over here. Again, it's not perfect. The natives haven't come back, but please keep in mind the height. The other reason I came this direction this morning is to provide a little bit more water to the natives that I planted over here. Great little spot. Oh, look at this little clearing over here. I wonder how this happened. This is the spot I was sitting the other day. I already released the video, but I was complaining about the noise pollution coming from that direction, which was the city workers weed whacking the new urban forest. Now, I just walked through one of the old urban forests that I described in the podcast. That's what's not getting managed, and it looks good. I'm gonna leave here and show you what they're doing in the newly planted urban forest by contrast. I'm laughing because of the level of stupidity. I didn't quite get here early enough to film the wavy leaf soap plant flowers being open, but you see a couple of them partially open. Most of them have closed back up already. I think it's so interesting how some flowers open up at night. I don't know my insects well enough. Just looks like gnats actually, but it'd be interesting to know more about that relationship here. Obviously, they are specifically choosing to hang out on this plant at this time of day. I spilled out too many leaves. I accidentally planted these poppies too close to each other, so they're probably actually hurting each other, but it's better than what's right next to it. This is what you call taking over territory with natives. You got to plant something if you want to win the battle in the long run. Here is the Hooker's Evening Primrose that I rescued from being eaten by the goats over at location 1. Starting to look good. Please note the base of native oak tree leaves, and please note how successful it's been without me doing anything else except for laying down a layer of leaves at suppressing the nearby weeds from growing through. I mean, just look at the perimeter. That speaks volumes. This is a buckbrush that I got from a nursery, and I actually planted it over at location 1, and after I saw that there was no hope of protecting the plants from the goats, and I realized that this place doesn't get grazed, I moved it to here. But now I'm debating moving it because I just don't think it's going to be able to survive the never-ending 100-degree days. Then again, how many things can? But once again, look at the leaves and look at the success of suppressing weeds. For those of you arguing that, well, that's because you pulled those weeds and then put the leaves down. Everywhere else that I didn't put the leaves down, a new generation of invasive plant has come through. Whether it's the same species or another species. They don't just sit there. They don't just give up. That's the problem with these invasive plants. It was necessary for me to put down the native leaf suppression. That or plant native plants. You can't just leave it, otherwise the invasives will come back. For example, I didn't have a full plan here, but I did put down some leaves, and what do you know? Alright, here's the poppy that I said I was going to help out against this Italian thistle that sprang up. Now let's look at the base. Again, I have a leaf suppression, but I didn't go very wide with it. So right at the perimeter of where I put the leaves, this damned thing came up. Ow. That's one nasty plant. Thanks, Italy. What on earth? I shouldn't speak in absolutes because nothing is 100%, or rarely is anything 100%. So you might get an invasive come through the leaves, but man, you can't deny the improvement. I mean, if you're if you're trying to poke holes in this by saying, oh, I see one somewhere, then you're trying desperately to be in denial of how effective using native leaves is. The other thing is the leaves. I'm going to pour some water here with that layer. The water will stay in the soil and not evaporate as soon as it gets hot, thanks to the protection these guys provide. Look at this guy over here. Look how well behaved he is. Sitting there in the safe spot. Not many safe spots out here, are they? All right, let's get out of here. In a previous video, as I was coming through the creek to get here the other day, the dry creek bed, I was pointing how thick and impenetrable the invasive Himalayan blackberry is, and this is it coming up higher, and so this is all Himalayan blackberry. And just look at it continue to just reach and reach and reach and cover more ground. I'm going to refer to this area that I just showed you as location 2. And now I'm going to head out of here and show you the new urban forestry project across the way. Since they weed whacked a lot of that, I'm not going to be able to show you the height, but before we get there, here's a spot that they usually goat graze, so you can see immediately how much worse it is than the spot I just walked through. I mean, look at this. Did you see anything like that? See anything like any of this that I just walked through? Okay, so for reference, those trees over there is where I just filmed. Now I'm over in the new urban forestry area, which amongst other things that is wrong about this, some of the only poppies that were remaining would grow here, and they just ignored that entirely. So you see the cones, you see the irrigation. You don't see it here anymore, but they also went through and sprayed herbicide and poison. You can see some signs of that still, and then they came through and mowed everything anyway after that. But here's what's really important. Unlike me, who removes it, they just leave it here. So that's what all the noise pollution is. You see things are a little bit deader here because this is where they sprayed the poison and then weed whack. This is eerily similar to when the goats graze. A lot of it just gets knocked over, and the goats sort of chop it in half with their mouths and leave parts of it. So, you know, the fact that people think this is fire abatement when they leave the fire fuel behind is interesting. And it's also a distribution program for the invasive weeds. I have filmed every stage of this. I'll eventually release it, but you see how attractive stage 1 was with the poisoning. It's a different color of death, and this just goes on and on. Look at this yellow star thistle. It doesn't care about the tan bark, it doesn't care about the poison that they put down. This is way less successful than my native leaf suppression. Look at this. In fact, a viewer mentioned that he liked the idea of using bark to suppress. Well, this is why leaves are better, believe it or not. Like a viewer mentioned the other day, the problem of desertification. Well, if you look at where herbicide is sprayed, you would think that desertification is the human goal. I mean, this is just becoming horrible excuse for habitat. You have this and invasive plant seeds. So you either have invasive plants come back, or you just have death. Those are the two things that happen with this management program. It does not yield natives. All right. What a disaster. Again, you see the herbicide areas. They put tan bark down. The tan bark's already old and shitty and dispersed. That did not take long. Up there, they actually mow along the people's private property lines, and then they weed whack. I'm not sure what wisdom they used to not weed whack all of the fire fuel, but you see, again, the story remains the same, and it goes on as far as the eye can see here and then further. So that's why you constantly hear weed whacking. This much ground to cover. By the time they finish a round, it's almost time to come back and weed whack what they already weed whacked. This is where they were laying down blue paint. The guy told me it was so that they could see where the irrigation line was better. Well, the blue paint was gone within a couple of days, and now they've come through and weed whacked. The program is so stupid, so inefficient, so ineffective that they have to weed whack where they already killed everything with poison. And even dumber than that is the way that they weed whack the pieces, even if it didn't grow where they had laid down the herbicide, they distribute the fire fuel weeds on top of that spot. Here's the real kicker, and it's the last thing I'm going to say about this location. They are very likely going to resume grazing of the creek behind me while protecting this area. You see the bigger trees, and then there's the shadow. That's another creek bed right there, and it actually has native plants in it. They actually fence the goats into that and force the goats to destroy the native habitat. And this area that actually is filled with weeds is going to be protected because humans planted trees. Don't destroy those. We planted them. But go destroy what nature planted. I gotta stop and talk about this. Look, I've seen them be destructive enough that they actually just weed whack down the sapling. So I guess I should be thankful that they didn't do that. But, isn't it funny that we're so worried about fire fuel that we have a constant war on leaves in the neighborhood, but you can leave this on the ground and you can leave some weeds growing next to this. But more to the point, if the goats had come through here, not only would this shit be on the ground still, but this sapling would be annihilated. Just finished. Done. And that's why they don't let the goats come through here. In the urban forestry spots. The goats will just take that cone down and eat the tree inside. I'd love to hear people come on and try to justify this, explain why it's not dumb. You got these little stretches where like, those weeds are fine. These are slender oats, by the way. And they'll weed whack this section and leave it on the ground. Go past this area that they're like, don't weed whack that. And then do the same thing. Just distribute all these invasive seeds to the ground. And never does it occur to any of them to do what I do, which is to put in something positive to replace the problem, rather than have to come back in a few months and do this stupidity all over again. You can hear the bitterness in my voice. Well, that's because I've listened for years and years to people praise this because in their minds there's some sort of fire protection program taking place. They don't understand what's happening. They just hear that something's being done for them and they take it. They take them for their word. Okay, I gotta get to the other location before it hits 100. I'll put that in a separate video since this one's already long.